Welcome back to 88.7 FM The Edge. You're listening to Hawk Talk, and I am your host, Connor McPhail. And today we have a very special edition of Hawk Talk featuring former Hawk swimmer and 2008 grad, Michelle Coombs Perry, who in 2007 became the program's first female national champion, touching first in the 100-yard freestyle at the 2007 Division III National Championship. Pretty impressive, honestly. Our athletic communications director, Monica DiPolito, interviewed Michelle and our former SUNY New Paltz coaches, which happens to be current Hawks Associate Director of Athletics, Wellness, and Recreation, Brian Williams, and Assistant Director, Danielle Strauchler. Please take a listen to Michelle's inspiring story and how she nearly walked away from the sport and found her place in New Paltz swimming program to become one of the best athletes to ever compete here.
Michelle, as you know, we're kind of doing a new series. I'm talking to former student athletes, talk about plays that we've caught on camera and just reminiscing on those and breaking them down. And I was talking to Brian about how cool it would be if we could get you on and talk about your national championship. And, you know, it was just awesome that we were able to find the footage of it so we can bring you on to kind of relive it for a little bit. But before we get into that swim, I just wanted to ask you some background stuff about why you transferred back to New Paltz originally, and what was it like to be able to come back to the sport and be a little bit closer to home?
Yeah, I think that's really the heart of the story and what made that swim so meaningful. So I had started off my collegiate swimming career at University of Richmond, and great program, you know, great coaches, athletes there doing amazing things. And pretty quickly, pretty early on, I just realized that it wasn't a match for me. I think that match between athlete and coach is so important. And for just a number of reasons, I don't think that it was a great match. And I found myself in an environment where I wasn't really thriving and reaching my true potential. And I tried to stick it out. And ultimately, over time, what ended up happening is I just got burned out and pretty depressed while there, and didn't have the support that I think I needed to really get through that. And so when I decided ultimately to leave Richmond, it was really my mindset at that point that I was never going to swim again, that I was just totally out of love with the sport and wanted nothing to do with it, really. And so ultimately, I knew I wanted us to stay home, to put my health first, and kind of lick my wounds a little bit. And started going to school at New Paltz, no intention whatsoever of swimming. Until I met Coach Brian, who I'm sure he'll share his perspectives of what it was like in those early days. But ultimately, it was just to come to school, and then it was meeting Coach Brian that really made me remember why I do love the sport, and that it was so much less about falling out of love with the sport, but just really needing the right coaching staff, the people who believed in you and had your back. That's what made me feel like I could give it a go again, and see if I could really tap that potential that I think was really untapped when I left Richmond.
So was it something where you bumped into Brian, or, you know, you were just in the pool? Like, how did it first kind of click? Was like, maybe I can get into the sport again?
Good question. So I think, to me, it felt like I bumped into Coach Brian. But I know kind of on the back end of things that I was actually in a class with another amazing, talented swimmer that came through New Paltz, Joanna. And she was in one of my classes, and I think a couple people had put the bug in Coach Brian's ear that I was around. And then it was kind of fortuitous. He knew probably that I was going to be at a local swim meet from my high school team, and just so happened to drop in to say hi.
Do you
Funny how
remember?
those things work out.
Do you remember what he said? That because at that point, was it almost a year where you hadn't been in the pool?
Yeah. He, at the heart of it, told me that I deserved a place to call home. I deserved a place to change the ending of my story and to give it a real shot in a place that supported me and nurtured me and helped me tap that growth. And he just wanted me to just try, just, no promises, no commitment, just, and in the beginning, it was actually just, come to a couple of the smaller practices at that time. I think Joanna and a couple other people were just training in the after season. And so he's like, just hop in the pool, just, feel it out. And that's all it took, really.
And then Brian, if you can go into it, I know you knew Michelle's family, knew of them, and they're full of great athletes. How excited were you when you heard that she was here? And it sounded like you were really determined to kind of convince her to come play for you.
I was thrilled. Those things don't happen very often where you have an opportunity. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what the opportunity was going to be. Michelle's family is swimming royalty, as I dub them, in the Hudson Valley. Her parents are amazing athletes. The boys, as I call them, and Michelle are all some of the Hudson Valley's best swimmers ever to come out of high school. And when I heard she was, at New Paltz and all of that, I was surprised, number one. And then two, it was kind of like, all right, how do we handle this? Everyone was kind of freaking. I'm not going to lie. A lot of people were freaking out. They're like, oh my God, we got to do that. And I'm like, no. There's a reason that she's here. And in my mind, I didn't know what had happened, but I didn't take it as something had happened, in my opinion, for her to be here and not swimming. Not that I felt like, I'm not going to degrade anything Division III or whatever, but she was, you have to understand where Michelle came from and where her brothers were and things like that, I knew she had gone Division I and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of thought something had gone amiss a little bit, and I didn't want people going crazy about something that A, I didn't know about, and B, I won't say scaring, because Michelle does not scare, but to maybe interfere with the opportunity to kind of find out what was going on. That was my main concern. And once we kind of got all the initial excitement settled down and a game plan of how we were going to approach this, I felt much better. I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen. All I wanted was an opportunity to kind of talk with her. And I'm glad it all worked out.
Danielle, as an assistant coach, as soon as you saw Michelle get in the pool, was it just she stood out right away? Like, it was like the talent level was just different from who being New Paltz swimmer and coaching there for a little bit.
Yeah, I think her stroke was fantastic. I mean, it was just like, let her go. Really smooth. And really, Michelle's experience just with life is what set her apart, in my opinion, from just our other students on the team, who are also very wonderful. But Michelle's humble personality, I think, again, experience going through a transfer process, just kind of transforming her mindset into not putting pressure on herself to do anything. And we weren't putting pressure on her. We just wanted her to be happy. And like she said, have a better end to her story. And we just wanted to, stay out of the way and let her do her thing. And I think all the swimmers around her became really good friends. Like, Michelle's personality just stands out. And she was just a fantastic leader, and it drew people to her, including us as coaches. And it was really fun to have her a part of that experience here at New Paltz.
And then Brian, as the season progressed, when did you realize that Michelle had the ability to really like make history? And was the 100 free the event that you thought that would put her over the top? I know she was very good at multiple events, including relays, but that event in particular.
You know, to be quite honest with you, you know, her pedigree and what she had done in the past, even if she had come close to what she had accomplished up through the time that she jumped in the pool with us, I knew that she was going to be a contender in terms of, you know, making nationals. And then from there, to me, it was just never talked about much because it wasn't important at the time, but the talent was always there. And as the season went through, I don't know, you know, that first swim meet, she wowed the crap out of everybody. So I guess maybe it started there, but I think it was there all along in the back of my mind. You know, it was never a stated goal, in my opinion. It just wasn't, you know, it wasn't the focus. I can honest to God say that, you know, it was not the focus for her to go to nationals and to win nationals and all this other stuff. It was really to get her happy and comfortable, and then all the rest was going to fall into place. And in terms of the 100 free, the only thing I focused on, to be honest with you, was the 50 free with her in a lot of aspects, because that's what she wanted. You know, I mean, everybody in the world tried to tell me that she couldn't do the 50 free. But when we spoke early on about how all this was going to work, she told me that she wanted to sprint and she wanted to do the 50 free. Okay, you can do whatever you want. You know, I mean, it wasn't about what she had the best opportunity to win nationals or win SUNYACs or any of that stuff. It was never about that. To me. To everybody else, yes. To me, no. So I focused on the 50 free. Did I think that she could win the 50 free? You know, at that point, that wasn't it. It was like, let's get her fast, because everybody said that she could only go so fast in the 50 free. And once we started nailing down the 50 free pretty quickly, I could say the 100 back was a main focus. Michelle, would you agree? She loves the 100 back. I was a backstroker, so we really jumped on that quite a bit. Danielle was a backstroker, so we had the nucleus of the backstroke, so that was a main focus. And then, you know, I knew the 100 was always a strong event for her, and I knew if we could get the 50 down, her 100, she had to be faster on the front end. And if we could get that down, the 100 was going to fall into place, which I think she could tell you probably better. But I think at the back of her mind, that 100 free was always right there. You know, she loves the 100 free.
And Michelle, same question. What do you remember from that season working with Brian, Danielle, and did you have any, you know, time goals at all during that season in any of your events, but especially the 100?
Yeah. So, great question. When I came back in that first season, I literally had no expectations for myself. There was a part of me that was still really, kind of mentally broken when I came back. And so much of the work was around, like, let's just make this fun again. And if it's not fun, let's not do it. So a lot of it was just about how I was feeling mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and the relationships with the coaches and the teammates. And whatever I did in the pool in terms of time was just a bonus. There's also, you know, all the training that I had gone through prior to New Paltz was very heavy on a lot of yards. So all through junior high and high school, our practices were 8,000 yards. Doing doubles, I was hitting 12,000 yards a day, plus dry lands and some strength work. And at New Paltz, it was this, you know, kind of older Russian model of training where you're pretty much doing the same thing each day of the week, but each week you're just adding more distance to it. So a lot of my prior training was, and belief was, I had to do a lot of swimming to be a good sprinter. And Coach Brian and Coach Danielle really shattered that. I didn't believe in it in the beginning. I thought, well, if we're only hitting like 5,000 yards, like, what's that? Like, I'm just here to have fun. And so as I started competing throughout the season, my body really, really responded to that. I think a part of it was that emotional, that mental piece that we were working on too. But my body responded much better to the training at New Paltz than it did at my Division I programs and prior training. And I think that was a really important lesson for me to learn. And ultimately, I carried that forward in opportunities down the road where I was training or coaching other young athletes. It's quality over quantity. And so as the season got going, I mean, I really didn't start putting pressure or expectations on myself at all. It was kind of like, all right, well, let's just see, what I can do. And I will say there was a little part of me at the back of my mind that was like, all right, if I can do something really cool this season, that might be a little like, to my old coaches. So I had no expectations that year. Everything was just the cherry on top. And I obviously exceeded my own expectations because they were pretty low. But certainly, I think the coaches, we were all in the same boat with expectations.
So for you, you didn't really focus on one event over the other. You just kind of swam what you wanted to swim and called it a day, basically?
No, I will echo Coach Brian. I think the 50 is where I needed the most work. I had a lot of heart, so that's why I liked the 100, right? Like, the 100 is just about who wants it the most. You can make a little mistake early on, and if you fight hard enough, you can still finish well with heart. The 50, there's no room for error. You have to be technically perfect because we're talking about like 1/100th of a second in the most competitive arena. And so I knew that if I really focused on perfecting the 50, that was going to show up in everything else that I did. So, I really liked focusing on that 50 so that I could enhance my technical skills. But the 100 just let me, be that like, it's almost that like raw animalistic like aggression, that like frustration that I had. I could just let it out in the 100. And I'm really competitive just by my nature. So that event was just, it was fun for me to swim the 100.
So looking back, it was almost like the perfect scenario in terms of everything that you gone through, that event, and then focusing on the 50 kind of prepared you. It set the stage for the 100 almost, if you look at it that way. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think even my strategy for the 100, which was to be as precise as I could in that first 50 and make sure that I was right there with the leaders of that heat. And then I knew that back half of the 100, I was going to throw down at whoever came my way. But I just had to make that first 50. I had to set myself up so that I could really let go that second half.
Brian, Michelle set records at the SUNY in the 50, 100, and 200 earlier and swam a 51.47 the 100. Did you expect her to best that time by almost a second at nationals?
When she did it, I didn't really think about it too much. I can honestly say my coaching philosophy with Michelle was day to day. Not that we weren't looking ahead at that point a little bit, but I never set in the back of my mind. I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool for her to do, 50 point in my mind was always because that's just such a big thing in swimming, but was it ever like, oh, she has to do this, or she will do this? No, I knew during taper though, after SUNY that she was going to go real fast. She had a really good taper for SUNY. We needed her to swim really fast at SUNY for our relays, and she did. She did some amazing splits in those relays at SUNY. Oh my God, her 50 backstroke that year. I don't know if they keep records of all that stuff, or I'd have to go back and look, but her 50 backstroke at the conference championship in that relay, it's still, at the time, I think it was the fastest 50 ever swam in Division III. I'd really have to go back. I don't want to make that a true claim, but it's got to be right there. But when she got back into the pool the following week or so, you could she just kept getting stronger. It was, so I knew she was going to go faster. Again, I never put a time in my head because that wasn't our relationship. And I didn't want that to become the focus of what we were doing. I just had so much fun that entire year, with the whole team, not just Michelle, but Michelle was such a huge part of that I didn't want it to end, and I didn't want anything to get in the way with what was working and what was important. Again, at the end of the day, at the back of my mind, I always knew that I was going to be judged as her coach based upon what she did, but nobody knew what was going on, and nobody knew the story except for Danielle and the people around the program. And my goal was always to make sure that she was happy. And that's all I cared about. And everything else was going to take care of itself, and it did.
And then Michelle, once you qualified, and you were also qualified in relay, so you had your friends with you going to nationals. What was the experience like just traveling there and being able to compete? Was that your first national meet that you competed at?
Yeah, that was my first Division III national meet. I had swam on the national level for some U.S. meets in USA Swimming, but collegiate, definitely. And first of all, absolutely, to travel with teammates is hands down always a better experience. And my family showed up too, which was big. So my brothers were swimming for Fordham at the time, and I just remember looking up in the stands and seeing them up there that first day, and I just broke down crying. I think the environment in general, when you get to travel with your coaches and your teammates, and your family shows up for you to support you in that way, when you never thought you would be there to be in your wildest dreams to begin with, that's the best feeling. I think that is what propels athletes to achieve things they don't think are possible, is that support.
And then it sounds like your family is a big athletic family with your brother there. Would you say that was one of the most special experiences that you've had as an athlete, to be there with your whole family and then your brothers competing as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, I do come from a big swimming family. My dad, he's, to this day, you ask him, well, what was my time at Section 9 when I was 15? And he was like, that year you swam the 100 back, and you actually swam against your best friend Kirsten and the 200 free, and you did this time, and your split at your 50 it's crazy. So having that kind of support, I mean, there's pros and cons to that, right? Like, because then after a swim you're less than thrilled with, you also get that, well, your 50 split to your feet was only, but in general, it's just amazing to have that kind of support and encouragement, especially when your family has been there and they get it. They understand, swimming, it's a big commitment and a lot of discipline, and every sport has its thing and requires discipline and requires commitment. I'm just a little biased about swimming. It can feel repetitive and it can be daunting, and it's hugely mental. And so having just tons of people around you who 100% get it, that's just support. Like, you can move mountains with that kind of support.
Do you remember feeling nervous or anxious, or were you comfortable? Were you ready?
Oh no, I've always been a nervous swimmer. I don't show it. But I actually remember, I don't remember what team we were sitting next to, but I remember when we had first gotten there, there was a girl, I think she was a butterflyer. She was right around where we were kind of camped out. And I just remember thinking, this girl looks like a bulldog. Like she is so built. And she must have been like, I don't know, it seemed like a foot taller than me. And I still think sometimes looking at that video, like, do I kind of look tiny on that block, like compared to all the other girls? So yeah, I certainly struggled with, anxiety and nerves. But I think, I talk about this a lot in my profession now, working with young athletes as a psychologist. It's so much about perspective, right? So anxiety or nerves, it's the same thing as feeling amped up. Like chemically, it's no different. It's just mentally what you do with that. And so I really spent a lot of my time throughout my career trying to reframe anxiety as excitement and channeling that in a very intentional and focused way into my races. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that made me successful was the mental game. It's so important.
And then Brian, going back to nationals a little bit, so Michelle swam, I think we went over this, the 50 free, 100 back, 200 free relay, 400 medley, 200 medley, prelims for the 100 and 400 free by Saturday. Were you worried at all that she was going to be tired for the 100 free, or the last event?
Oh, she had such an amazing meet up into that, and swimming is it's a building thing. I think if you start off your first race swimming fast, which she did, a lot of times you'll see a really strong trajectory. Not to say that you get gas, because it happened to me at my national. In my last swim, I almost died, but I'm not the athlete Michelle was, that's for sure. So from day one, she really got stronger. Her 100 back on Friday night was amazing. It would have broken the national record the year before. The gal that she swam against just was a slightly bit faster, which kudos to her, So I wasn't totally worried. I remember getting up Saturday morning just being like, all right, is it still there? And she looked fantastic in the morning and everything. Her warm-ups look great. I'm the kind of coach where if I can see a good warm-up, I feel a lot better. If I see a crappy warm-up, oh, God, you got to calm me down, not everybody else. So I was pretty confident. I can say when I woke up, I was like, I wondered, because it was a lot of swimming. But she was prepared. I knew through taper she was going to be fine.
And then Danielle, did you and Brian ever kind of talk amongst yourselves to be like, I think she can win a national championship?
I don't think that ever came up. I think, like Brian said, and I'll echo that, when we saw Michelle in warm up that last morning and she was just in the zone, kind of looked at each other. We're like, she's going to have a good race. Yeah. And then during it, yeah, we were, I'll let Michelle talk about that before I give my comments about it, but that was amazing. But all of her swims were fantastic. So I don't think there was ever a moment that we ever spoke like that way about it. But maybe in the back of our heads, we thought she could do it. We just never said it out loud to one another.
I think Brian told me he's superstitious, so you probably wouldn't say it out loud.
Very.
I think I might know this answer, but Michelle, did you remember feeling any fatigue at all? And were you happy with the way you swam at your previous events that you had? Were you determined to surpass those swims? And did you have a national championship in your mind?
Yeah, so it's something that is interesting. Over the course of my career, I actually never set time goals, or I've never said, I'm going to win the 100 free, or I'm going to win. I just never functioned that way. What I did say is I want to have a better time. I want to surpass. And that was throughout a season, and then from one championship year to a next. I always wanted to exceed, what I had done previously, but I never approached any swim with a goal in terms of a time or a place. I just knew I didn't like to get beat. So that's what I focused on. That whole weekend, I was definitely happy with my performances. I'm hard on myself. I always have been. So anything less than perfect is, there's room to grow. I'm not hard on myself, like berating myself, but I always want to exceed and excel. So I was happy with how I had done. I had certainly, in the 100 backstroke, I had surprised myself, I think.
Great swim.
Yeah, it was a good swim. I think, one of the things that I struggled with is in the 100 back is often my legs and my lungs would go out. And it was very much that mental piece of pushing through that burn. And I don't remember feeling, I certainly my legs were on fire at the end of that race, but I didn't feel that like cement wall that you sometimes run into and you're just trying to finish those last 12 yards. So I think in general, my conditioning was amazing there. I had the stamina that I needed, and I wasn't worried going into the 100 free that last night about, am I too tired? I just was kind of riding high on how good my taper was and my conditioning was at that point.
And with everything you went through prior to that season, did you feel like the best you were mentally in terms of going into that race for that last swim?
Yeah, absolutely. It took a season. It took, a while of, having, a disappointing race or something earlier in the season. And then Coach Brian and Coach Danielle just being there to say like, hey, we're fine. Are you having fun? Like, that's, you're fine. You're doing fine. So there was a lot of just focus on building up that piece. I think too, the support of the team. My teammates were just incredible. And that can be really hard for a transfer student to come into a team where those bonds are set and, and there can be competition and a feeling like you might be taking somebody's spot on the relay and all that kind of territorial stuff that happens. And the team took me with open arms. So having just that environment where people focused on having a good time and the culture and that family feeling, that's healing on top of the healing that I got to do physically. A piece to the story was I had a chronic shoulder injury that started my sophomore year in high school. And obviously overuse doesn't help that. So my mentality of you have to do tons of yardage, it doesn't jive with a shoulder injury from overuse. And I just, felt like I had to push through it. And my junior year in high school, I had mono. I told no one. My parents knew, but I told no one and kept swimming through it because that's just what you do. So coming into an environment where the thing that mattered most was my health and my happiness, that was what my body needed to elevate to a level that, maybe somewhere I thought might be possible, but had no expectation or even desire to get there by the time I showed up at New Paltz.
Do you feel like, looking back, that it wasn't a coincidence that it was your last race that was the one? Like, I feel like everything that you went through was the culmination of those last 50 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't believe in coincidence ever. I think everything happens for a reason. But absolutely, I remember just feeling really good that, for the finals that night, and my warm up, I just felt like I was floating. Everything felt easy. And I just got up there behind that block, and I just knew I was going to leave it all out there. Whatever it took, if it meant the whole heat went a 54 and the 54 was the best I could do, like, great. But all that mattered to me was I was going to show up and compete. And I wanted to be so tired at the end of that race that somebody was going to have to pull me out of that pool. Like, I had to give it all. And yeah, there was a little bit of like, you know, I don't want to talk about it too much because I might get emotional about it, but there was a little bit of like, you know, for all the people out there who just didn't think I had it in me or that I wasn't worth putting that time or energy or effort into, like, this is for you. I'm gonna show my worth here. So
my first question is, I guess it's to Brian, because I'm not a swimmer, but do you feel fast? Like, did you feel like that was that you were going to probably touch first at that point, like mid swim?
I wasn't sure. So I knew right before I went into that last turn that we had a race, that it was close. I also knew that that I was going to just put it all out there. And when I came off the wall and took that breath, and I only breathe to my right side, that's like one of the really bad traits I have as a swimmer. I wasn't quite sure where the girl on my left was, and she was my main competition. So I just really tried to focus on myself, on whatever I had left, just put that out there no matter where everybody else was. And so I didn't know going into that wall. I knew it was close, but I didn't know that I was in front. I did break my nails on the wall trying to get my hand in there because I knew it was really close. So it wasn't until I looked up at the clock that I even knew I had won.
What was that feeling like, and what did you think of first, if you remember?
I was shocked. There's a photographer on deck that took a picture of me the moment I realized, and I have my hand over my mouth, like just shocked and smiling. And then I immediately whipped my head over and I looked at, the coaches and the teammates there. And I think Coach Brian almost fell in the pool because he was jumping around so much. Yeah, it was shocking.
Brian, did you knew right off the block when the horn sounded she had that potential? I mean, it was only 50 seconds long, so I'm sure the thoughts were quick.
I knew in warm up that we were going to have a shot.
Yeah.
We do sprints and builds in warm up towards the end of our warm up and everything like that, and we do a timed start. To about I don't think we've ever maybe 30 feet to check the start speed and everything like that. And we had worked on it all year. Michelle stayed day after day, because that was what we had to fix. Starts, turns, and finishes with her on that 50. So we knew where we needed to be and adjusted that, And when she hit the water that night, there were a whole bunch of coaches around me, and, you got your stopwatch out and you're just watching, and I'm trying to be cool about it, but I'm going, holy crap. And I got all these other coaches, this one guy's like, do you see this? Do you see this? You get this? And I'm like, yeah, I got it. He's like, guys, don't go that fast. I'm like, I know. I have a whole team. I got lots of people on my team. I'm familiar with swimming, and trying not to be jinxing myself and superstitious and all of that. And I remember she went in and she did her fastest one of the year. And I was like, we're good. And she looked at me and said, no, I'm going to do one more. And I was like, oh God, I'm a firm believer in, my coaches always taught me, I'll make you do more until you nail it. And she nailed it. And she's like, nah, I'm going to do one more. And when she did the last one, I was like, I was like, holy. I mean, at that point, I'm like, oh, this is crazy, because I knew she was a better second half swimmer than a first half swimmer, and I'm like, if she's doing this on the first 25, I'm like, oh my God. So I kind of knew she was going to be in play at that point. In all honesty, I didn't say a word about it, but. And then when she got up on the blocks and then I saw her first 50 time, I was like, oh, I'm like, good gosh. I'm like, that's fast. I remember looking at Danielle, we're like, holy cow. I think it was like it was 24, I don't know. It was a 24-foot touch. Danielle, I don't know if you remember, it was like a 24-6-foot touch or something like that. And it was just like, holy crap. And then at the 75, when I saw her feet go over, I really started to – I sat down, I think. I'm pretty sure I sat down where I was standing. I was just watching the board because I was just like, oh, that was crazy. But I really attested to that last warm-up 25 that she did, that she felt she needed to just – whatever it was, she needed to fix. And she fixed it. I don't think there was anything wrong. I mean, you can't tell when it's, you're that far away and stuff, but she obviously felt something that she had to do once more. And that's her. That is her.
Brian,
in a nutshell.
Brian, how happy were you for her to get that?
I still haven't figured out how happy I am for her. I mean, it's, just watching that race, anytime I think about that race, and I've got that picture she's talking about in my office, and, and when I walk out the door and I see it very often, it still gives me like chills and brings me to tears, because it wasn't about her winning to me. I think that she just seems so genuinely happy and surprised, and I think that was it for me, and that she went 50 point. And when I saw the reaction of her, that was it. But then when it sank in and we looked at the scoreboard, and I remember looking at Danielle, I'm like, she went 50 point, and that's just such a big thing in swimming, that it was all right there for her. So whatever she wanted to take out of what we had done that year, and for the reasons we done, it was all there. It was all there. She felt better. She was happy. She shocked herself. And then at the very end, we could point to the time. So whatever she wanted to take out of that was there. I don't think there was anything left. And that was what it's still, I feel like my career was completed on that. I've been very blessed at New Paltz in all my swimming years. I've grown up with the support of my family, so many swimming friends, and the teams that I started coaching when I was 16, all of those people developed me into what I wanted to provide her. I was very lucky in my own swim career that I can honestly say that I walked away feeling fantastic, and I have no regrets about anything that I ever did. I made some dumb choices here and there, but in terms of being able to walk away from my sport, I was content with that, and that's what I wanted for her. I felt that she deserved it. I felt that she certainly earned it. And just getting to know her, even within that first meeting with her down in Newburgh, and then all of the subsequent conversations that didn't involve swimming, I just wanted her to be happy. And it was right there. That's it. And I have a very hard time expressing what it means to me for her and for the program and all that. It was just it's that big in my life,
Danielle, being a coach and swimming at New Paltz to witness history, personally, how did it feel, as an alumni, as a coach, and knowing Michelle she became the first female national champion at New Paltz?
Oh man, just got chills thinking about it, and watching that video. I mean, I could honestly say, and I'll echo what Brian said, is I felt so much joy for her. And looking around, I mean, yes, we looked up at the board, but we were really intense on just watching her race and her finish, and to see her surprised and excited, yeah, that sums it up. I felt like we did a good job with her, the way she needed it to be. And it provided her that opportunity to be the first female national champion at New Paltz. I'm so fortunate and lucky to have stayed as an assistant coach. And I really thoroughly enjoyed my time working for Brian and with Michelle and the other 3 girls that were out there with us, and watching them all jump up and down the deck. We were like probably knocking each other over, and other coaches around us just congratulating us. And, Michelle, and those girls and our team and that family put us on the national map. And that was an awesome feeling. And to see how happy Michelle was and her teammates were for her, like she described before, we were really a close-knit family. All the conversations leading up, it was just about checking in, how's everybody doing, and making sure people were happy and healthy. Most importantly, Brian, I can say Brian would make sure they're having their Gatorade and staying hydrated, and but I do remember jumping up and down and hearing Michelle's parents screaming behind us, for her. It made me so proud to just know her and be a part of that moment,
Michelle, I couldn't imagine seeing your parents and your dad right after that. Do you remember what he said to you, or in particular?
Yeah, so, because it was my last race, I didn't even warm down after that. And so after, hugging the coaches and the girls, I ran upstairs to see my parents, and my dad met me in the hallway, like right outside the locker room, and hugged me. And he was crying, and I don't think I've ever seen him like that. And he actually, when he wrapped his arms around me, he's like, "Oh my God, your back is so strong right now." He was like, "You're so ripped." But it was just this relief because, I think, and I appreciate this as a parent myself now, more than I ever did before. But when you see your kid, I think for him, you have such high expectations and high hopes, and you send your kid off to school on a full ride at a D1 program, and you think like that's the right decision for them, and then to kind of watch your kid struggle the way that I did, and give up, like literally give up a scholarship and walk out the door and say, "I don't know where I'm going to go to school. I don't ever want to swim again. I'm done." And then struggle with depression. And so to see your kid go from that dark place to, in the course of a year with the amazing support that I had, and it culminate in that, I think for my dad and my mom, but in that moment for my dad, it was just this huge relief of like, she's been redeemed, she's made it. And my mom, I'm talking a lot about my dad. I think that was just my dad's not like the most emotional person, so that stands out for me. But my mom was just, forget it, she was a mess.
I know you and your family are successful swimmers and athletes, but does that moment, do you guys talk about that moment a lot? Like, how often does it come up where you're talking about that swim?
We don't talk about it that much. I mentioned the competitive side of me. My brothers are also very competitive, and so they'll say, "Oh, Michelle swim." So I don't say anything about it. I don't think it's brought up that much when my brothers are around. But every now and then, my dad will say, that swim. And he'll make sure to point it out to anybody who will listen. Like, my husband has probably seen the video more times than he cares to at this point. So.
Was that the most meaningful swim that you've ever had in your career?
Yeah, I would say that Individually, yeah, hands down, that was just the culmination of life until that moment for me. But I've always been a relay swimmer at heart. Like, I live and breathe relays. When I think like about, as a older, less in shape alumni, when I think about like the glory days in swimming, I actually think back to the relays. I lived for those moments on a relay where we were like behind and I got to anchor, and like I just wanted to bring it home. Like that like team, I don't know. There's something about those relays that just, I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it. It actually almost makes me want to be a master swimmer.
Almost, right?
Almost.
It's funny because that was something that Michelle and I bonded on very quickly. When I learned that, she had been such a successful individual swimmer, but Newburgh had great swimmers, so their relays were always good. And it just never thought how much that would mean to her. And one of our first conversations was like, she was like, no, I love relays. Because when I talked to her at Newburgh about that, I'm like, we're very, very close to making nationals. I need one more person. Joanna was graduating. I'm like, I got to get one more person. I don't care where it is at that level. And I remember her eyes lit up like, I love relays. And we talked. And, when I got to college, like in high school, I always loved relays. We made states in relays. That's my first experience at states. I was in 7th grade or something like that. And I was able to go because of relays. And ever since then, I had such a great appreciation and always tried to do my best on relays. And all through high school and then in college, Coach Dacus was just all about team. He's the one who taught me about swimming is not an individual sport. And if you're going to take that on my team, you're not going to swim for me. And I really bonded with that feeling, and our relays and my boys, they're all in my weddings. They're still my 3 guys that are my best friends really are my relay teammates. And so we had that bond, and it just, there was a focus there, and I always preach, I think Danielle will teach you, I always preach relays. You could crap out in your individual race. I'm not going to get mad at you. You crap out on a relay, and I know you weren't trying, you're going to have some issues with me. So yeah, that was a good bond, and the relays were just so important to New Paltz. They always have been and always will be. And that's something I take great pride in, because that shows that swimming is not an individual sport as everyone thinks it is. It is a team sport. Anyone that had to go to nationals by themselves and things like that, they understand it. And we were very blessed and lucky to have all the quality people and swimmers that we had in order to even have a shot at making a relay. So,
Michelle, for you, looking back, and probably at the time, how important was it now that you've got to finish your collegiate swimming career, and how much did those 2 years shape you and what you do today?
I think it's like my hero's journey, right? Like you walk through, everybody has these moments in their path where the path gets rough and you're challenged. I think that's part of life, right? Like it's not a question of if you get knocked down, because we all get knocked down. But what do you do after that? How do you stand up? And I think that if Coach Brian and Coach D didn't convince me to give it a go, my very identity would have been different. I would have always wondered, what if? And there's a lot of stigma that comes with walking away from a scholarship and walking away from, athletic talent. How I defined myself, how I looked at myself in the mirror, I think would have been very different. And so New Paltz, it gave me the opportunity to perceive this experience as that hero's journey, that redemption, and that to prove to myself I am more resilient than, than I believe sometimes. I think, the piece of the story that I don't like to talk about that much is that it got so bad at one point that I literally had somebody on the coaching staff at Richmond tell me I was a cancer to the team. And so when that's your identity, when you take that on, that's tough. So to go from that place to, New Paltz, where your team is just as excited for you in those good moments and those wins as you are for yourself, when they believe in you more than you believe in yourself, yeah, that changes everything. So I think that, I think about my field as a psychologist, the whole message in therapy that I provide is hope, that you deserve to be supported. You deserve to have good things happen to you. You are worthy. You are enough. You are valued. That's what New Paltz gave me. And man, if I didn't have that corrective experience, I really don't know who I would be today.
Looking at the past, if you didn't have a class with Joanna, if Brian didn't show up randomly at that meet, do you think you would be who you are today and doing all the great work that you have done since you've left New Paltz?
No, there's no way. And I can't, I try to imagine, I try to think back on these pivot points of where things might have changed. I mean, so many things, so many opportunities have come my way since crossing this team's path, these coaches. I mean, scholarships. I had an interview for one scholarship. It was actually a huge one that I won for my graduate education, which I never would have been able to afford without financial assistance. And the guy interviewing me said, I like that you're an athlete and that you were a captain after your experiences, that you came back to be in a position of leadership after you had been through so much, after you'd walked away from this other situation. And that speaks to your resilience and your character. And I got the job. I got the scholarship and the job. So I can't even fathom what my life would be like now had, Coach Brian not tracked me down and Coach D not supported me mentally and emotionally through this process, and Joanna not been in my class. And I mean, I like I said, I don't think there are coincidences. I think, everything happens for a reason, and there might have been other instances where, fate would have kept nudging me. But it just took this one nudge and just a little window of hope. And I guess that's all that was needed.
I know Brian had mentioned some of the great work that you've done since leaving here. If you want to go into what you do now and in your work, and I know you live in in the Virginia area, just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So so since I've left New Paltz, I got my master's in mental health counseling while I was there, and then moved down to Maryland, where I took a job with the Army, and I've been with them ever since. A long time, 11 years. And we do public health work. So basically, whenever a unit is experiencing a cluster of suicides or a rash of domestic violence or a mass shooting, we often fly in and work with the leadership to assess the unit and figure out what might be happening, and work from a public health perspective, trying to help the population rather than, one-to-one counseling, which is what our field is traditionally known for. And so I've been doing that work since leaving New Paltz. And then 4 years ago, I also started a private practice, the Center for Trauma, Stress, and Anxiety. And we provide individual and group counseling to those struggling with anxiety and depression and PTSD in our local area. And it's since grown into this group practice. It's amazing. It's this team of clinicians that I'm so honored to be working alongside, and the work is amazing. And so I get to kind of do a little bit of both, that individual therapy treatment that I love, and then also that public health perspective where with the Army, you get to see the impact that you make on a larger population level. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff.
How often do you use your own personal experiences with your work? And I'm sure you come across some incredible people and their story too. How has that changed your perspective of how you kind of view certain topics and certain things?
Yeah. So I will say with my clinicians and my teammates with the Army, I often do share my story when somebody is met with a lot of adversity and just feeling really burned out or run down. And I hope that plants that seed of hope that, there are people in your life. I hope to be one of them, but there are people in life that when you're in the right environment, you can achieve things that you never thought were possible for yourself. In therapy, where there's all kinds of things about when to self-disclose and how much to self-disclose and all of that. There's lots of boundaries and rules around that for many good reasons. And so it's pretty rare that I ever share that piece of me, that piece of my story. But there have been the rare occasion where I've seen a really big parallel, and I think it's helpful to the client as opposed to just some story I want to tout or share for personal reason. In those moments where it might be motivating or encouraging for them, I have shared that story before, but it's rare with a client.
Have you ever thought about, or have you worked with student athletes that were like yourself, struggling like how you struggled?
Yeah, I certainly have. I think, so I'm down here in Maryland, and our area is really interesting. The athletics is interesting compared to New York. There's certainly a learning curve in the way that young athletes are developed. But what I will say is my area here, there's a lot of pressure on these young athletes today to do it all and to be very focused and disciplined. And there's a really, I don't want to say that it's toxic, but I think in some households it can go really far where there's not opportunity for play and creativity and imagination, and it's all about work and discipline and focus. I think both have their place in a healthy kid's development. And so a lot of times they come in under the guise of they're choking in the middle of a game, or they've got a lot of anxiety and need to work on their performance. And really at the heart of a lot of it is it's just not fun for them anymore. And kind of pulling without saying much, sometimes pulling from my own experience, I can really appreciate and relate to that, and then help them and their families ideally strategize around ways to make it more fun. And maybe it requires a different team or a different coach, or a different environment. And other times it's just ways to infuse some creativity and fun into what your day-to-day looks like outside of the arena or the pool or wherever.
Do you ever find yourself, I mean, I know you have so much of your career left, but find yourself full circle in a sense where, like, ironically, you're in the Virginia area where you started, where you came from, going through what you came through, and now you're helping, you know, young people in general that were you at one point in their lives?
Yeah, I do find it ironic sometimes. You know, and it's interesting too. I don't know if I've actually ever shared this with you, with the coaches, but pretty soon after that 100 free swim, my old coach reached out to me by email and sent in some form kind of an apology, a congratulations, and also an acknowledgement that maybe they hadn't handled me clearly, hadn't handled me in a way that I could achieve my potential there. You know, and that was really unexpected and led to a lot of kind of healing about that. I mean, I still have my feelings about how I was treated there, but certainly that, I don't know, that was kind of, that gave me some closure in a way with that. And so I think I get to kind of full circle being in this area, working with other professionals, other athletes around, you know, depression and dissatisfaction and lower performance and, you know, things like that. Like, it's just, I don't know if it's so much as coming full circle as this was just the path I was always supposed to be on. You know, I think so much of what you do in life, ultimately, you draw on your experiences, your lived experiences, and things happen for a reason. I think this was my path for a reason. As painful and exciting as it was.
Well, I just thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I'm glad that I got to bring the band back together a little bit.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah, it's been too long.
Definitely.